The perfect cruelty of the Hunger Games. I do want to say, I love the Hunger Games. It is such an interesting concept to have like a bunch of kids just in it. Like, how did she think of that? Like, how did the author just like, yeah, let's put all these kids in an arena and just have them kill each other? Like, that'd be awesome. And then she also built like this entire like you can bet on it, and you can send parachutes, and like a lot of the kills are like from mutts for that the Capitol created. Like, she comes hard with that. She Yeah, and I also have recently rewatched like the Hunger Games, like from Katniss's like her whole trilogy with my other friend. And I my other friend was like, she was asking me a bunch of questions and stuff, and like it really got me thinking about like the whole like history of the Hunger Games and like the different districts and how the different districts work, and kind of how it put into perspective how far away like some of the districts feel. Like she asked me like a question about District 13, and it kind of got me thinking like, why would the Capitol specifically bomb 13? Like, why not bomb all of the districts? Or why not bomb, I don't know, District 3 or District 4 or whatever? Why District 13 specifically? And why did District 13, like, why did any of the district, I feel like that's kind of easy. Like, why did any of the districts join the rebellion? Because they obviously hate the Capitol, like fucking duh. But why did the Capitol bomb 13? And it was because 13 was the original, like they produced all of the guns and the weaponry and everything, and the rebels, like, took over 13 and had all that ammunition. So in order to squash 13, like, in order to squash, like, the rebellion with their weapons, the Capitol just bombed 13. Like, all their weapons are just gone, like their supply for it at least. And the Capitol moved the armory and stuff to District 2. I thought, why would you move it to District 2? Why not just do, like, I don't know, like District 4 or 5? There had to be a reason. And I think it's because District 13, if you think of 1 through 13 as like a scale, like the Capitol is like 0, and then it's 1, 2, and it's kind of like on like the little scale. District 13 is all the way at the end. So I think that District 13, because we see District 12, like District 12 is like poor, and they're just like, they're impoverished or whatever. It's not whatever. That's awful. But I don't know. Like, because 12 is like really bad. Do you think 13 would be worse, or do you think 13 would be like better? Or I don't really know how it works. But in my mind, I think of it as a scale, and just the 13 is all the way at the end, and they're so detached from the Capitol. I think it's just like the Capitol, like, they didn't really have a reason to stay with the Capitol at all, because like they didn't really get anything out of it. So in order to right that mistake, the Capitol decided to place the like weaponry and like all the manufacturing of like the weapons and stuff in District 2, because it's not exactly District 1, which is like jewelry, I'm pretty sure, because that's like directly funneled into the Capitol. But District 2 is like a safe bet because it's really close to the Capitol, and they get all of the like riches and the money and, you know, everything. And it's just better that way. So the rebels can't take over too, which is also why in Katniss's like original thing, that fight in the tunnels, I was like, why is District 2 so loyal to the Capitol that they'd shoot, like, he shot like one of the people shot Katniss. This is obviously spoilers. I mean, it's been out for like 15 years, so I mean, but like, they were just so that instilled like such a loyalty to the Capitol that they again would never turn over to the rebels if it was a rebellion. So that was kind of like a safe decision on the Capitol's part to place their manufacturing of weapons in District 2. Also, I'm a genius, okay? I have been milling this over in my brain. Like, I'm just so good. Probably people have thought and like typed in Reddit or whatever, and I'm pretty sure that like people have figured it out, but I figured it out on my own. I didn't go on Reddit. It was a freaking thought in my brain, okay? And I solidified it. It was like a little theory, and then it was like proven. It was just awesome. In Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I'm just gonna glaze the author because the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is Snow's like backstory, just brought everything together, like all the connections throughout Katniss's whole thing. It's just amazing. Okay, the way that it's just like fully like I don't like the movie all that much because I read the book. I really, really, really like the book. I don't really like the movie all that much, not because of like the actors or anything. They did a good job, but I just think it's too like fast paced, and they didn't really spend it. I feel like it was specifically made for like secondhand watchers to kind of like look up, and be like, oh, I know what's happening. I've already seen this or whatever, but I read the book, okay, and I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for my class. I read it before, but I read it for my class again. And I was also reading Haymitch's Games, the Sunrise on the Reaping. I was also reading that at the same time. And I realized while I was reading Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, in the opening scene when Tigress has made Coriolanus his like new shirt, she specifically points out, I don't know if it's in the movie, but in the book she says, oh, I made the buttons out of tesserae from their bathroom, right? And then Coriolanus makes a comment later on being like, this looks like the tiles from the maid's bathroom, or whatever. And he's like and that shirt signifies, and it's heavily like throughout the whole book, at least, I don't know, like in the movie it's kind of like it's just said, but in the book it's heavily emphasized that Corio is poor. He doesn't have anything to his name. Like he needs money from the capital, like from the academy to go to university, and so he's trying to make up this appearance of being wealthy, of having status, because that's everything in the capital. Like that is everything, and able to be like preferred to be like favorable for the I don't know why I'm blanking, but for like the money to go to university, he thinks he has to portray himself. Well, he has to portray himself as this wealthy guy. So when Tigress makes the shirt and she has the buttons in it, the teachers comment on it. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, like that shirt's so fancy and so great," or whatever. And my connection to Katniss, is in the first Hunger Games movie. This is in the book more, but in the first movie, we see Gale and Katniss on the little hill, and they're oh my god, the bread and stuff. That whole scene. He says, she's like, oh, how many times did you put in your name? And he says 40. Now the reason he put his name in so many times is because I don't know the exact number, but like when you enter the Hunger Games when you're 12, you have to put one in, which is why Prim has to put one in. And then 13, you have to put two raffles, two tickets, things, whatever, two in the bowl, okay? And then as it later goes down the line, you have to do, like, that's the required. So if you put more than that, I don't know if it's like every 5 or every 10 or whatever, but if you put more than what's required, then you get these little packages that are from the capital that have like food and clothes and like necessities in it that your family would need to survive if you have like a really big family. And Gale has a really big family, so he puts his name in 40 times. And he doesn't get picked, obviously, but a lot of the kids in 12 do this because they need money to support their families, obviously. And the packages are called tesserae. They're called tesserae packages. So this whole thing comes together where, Snow was trying to present himself as wealthy and, successful and have status of some sort. And you have people put their name in a lot of times, which is awful, but a lot of times you get these tesserae packages directly from the capital to portray themselves as, that they not necessarily have status, but they have wealth, they have something, when otherwise they do not, to keep up the appearance of, yes, I have fresh clothes and I have fresh food to last however long and everything. That was just so interesting to me, how like it just all comes together from Snow's experiences and what he brings to the table and everything. It's just masterful. It's just amazing. Like, oh my god, I could go on forever talking about the Hunger Games. It's just so fascinating. it's generally just like psychology wise as well, and what it does to people that watch as well. Like it's just awesome.
I remember that the series exists. Specifically, its world building, and even more specifically, the games themselves. When I think about the games for more,
I would love, I as a massive consumer of this franchise, I would love just having a show and each episode just be a random game. Like you don't have to do a whole movie where like we learn about the characters and their backstories and they're called up and it's just like this big thing and they try to like dismantle the arena. I don't care. I want to see Mag's games. I want to see Joanna's games. I want to see Phoenix games. Like every episode is just a new game, and you just go into the episode, you don't know any of the characters, and it's all said through dialogue. Like at one point one of the characters turns to Finnick and goes, "Hey Finnick, like what's your idea? What do you think we should do?" Or they could do that, and they can do like we're in the Capitol watching like the highlights and stuff. I generally I would watch that. I would actually watch that. Which, okay, I know that's kind of like sick. Like I'm low key Capital citizen, but I don't care. Like I would watch it. I would just like I genuinely just want to see like just random games because I find that I like just watching the games and like how everything unfolds. And again, it's like, oh, you're a Capital citizen or whatever. Call me that. I don't care. Like that would just be so interesting. So interesting.
within a minute, I find myself struck by how brilliantly cruel and manipulative this entire institution is. How every facet of the games works to suppress the empathy and humanity of an entire society. Beginning the series with the 74th annual games, it's easy to wonder how the world got to this admittedly extreme point. So it's maybe not surprising that, from A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we know that the games weren't always like this. That was one of my favorite things from watching the prequel. As the 10th games begin, there's worry in the...
They were all kind of figuring out how this would all work and kind of just... Yeah, that's why I also like The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because a lot of things are figured out. And a lot of things you can see that play into Katniss's as well.
Capital. Viewership is falling. No one in the Capitol really wants to watch, and for good reason. These are the early games, devoid of any of the pomp and flair and pageantry that will later define them. These games are advertised for little more than they actually are, a public execution. And people aren't watching because the games are too cruel.
Coriolanus didn't show those people anything they didn't already know.
I don't need your help, Sejanus.
That the tributes are human beings, just like us. That's why nobody wants to watch the games.
And so, the Capitol is looking for a solution. Not to make them less cruel, of course,
but to mask
it. But to make that cruelty less real. A more rewarding viewing experience. So, by the time we see the 74th Hunger Games, we have a very different picture. The games have evolved into something elaborate. It's grotesque. And it's a phenomenon.
If the Colonel saw the price of a lunch today, he'd have some choice words. But with KFC's $5
phenomenon. The origin of the games is pretty standard authoritarian brutality. After a collective district rebellion, the Capitol installed the games as a show of their power, a warning to the districts to know their place. And what's more powerful than to not simply order the yearly execution of 11 children, but turn it into a national entertainment event? The concept alone is disturbing, and intentionally so. When she wrote the series, Suzanne Collins meant to comment on our desensitization to violence as she was flipping between TV channels. First a reality show, and then the Iraq War. And in their full iteration, the games are these ideas fused together. But the fully realized Hunger Games aren't just conceptually horrifying, they're a mass psychological manipulation of Panem society that rewires the hearts and minds of all its citizens. Every aspect of the games sows discord between its people at every possible level, and it makes people's own humanity and that of others worth very little. The games do this with the use of, broadly, two elements: competition and spectacle. which serve unique functions for every part of Panem's heavily stratified society. So, how do the games function for the districts? First, there's the reaping itself. The method for choosing tributes intentionally targets class. The premise for the games, in the first place, rests on the idea that, at the end of the day, even a peaceful person will attack someone else in order to survive. PETA even says as much. But the games also rely on people acting out of desperation outside of the arena. Desperation like, say, the conditions of poverty. By allowing people to enter their names more times in exchange for food, the reaping system incentivizes poorer people to be chosen. And why do this?
I didn't
This
even
isn't
think
just
about that.
added cruelty for the sake of it. It's multiplying the odds that whoever is chosen will be someone who is already struggling and hungry.
And therefore it'll be easier for the like District 1 and District 2 to kill them because they're already struggling. Or like they're already impoverished or
in a lifelong survival mode. Someone who is less likely to want to challenge or have the tools to challenge the system that's oppressing them.
Yeah.
Someone for whom kindness is too costly. Singling them out, putting a weapon in their hands, and saying, it's you or them. And we can see the way this plays out by comparing PETA and Katniss's different reactions to being chosen.
Yeah, I just keep wishing that I could think of a way to show them that they don't own me. You know, if I'm gonna die, I want to still be me.
I just can't afford to think like that.
If Katniss dies, her family is left defenseless. But if Katniss sucks up to the Capitol and somehow wins, they aren't. So it's a forced choice. Compare this to PETA. Because PETA was in a slightly more privileged position, albeit within the poorest district, he had a little more space to consider his own wants and feelings and sense of identity. As the son of a baker, he didn't have to worry about food in the same way Katniss did, for example. Which isn't to say that identity and self-reflection are a privilege. These are things that we all deserve. But that's precisely why those things are targeted. If people are focused on surviving, they simply won't have the time or energy to consider anything else. Capital also presents the games themselves as offering a permanent escape from poverty.
Yeah, because you
win, and you and your family are set for life. But the promise of riches is a carrot on a stick, a hollow promise to an individual rather than commitment to systemic change.
Yeah.
Because treating the districts better as a whole is out of the question. But elevating one district citizen above the others, that's both simpler and a way to send a message. Look, this is what happens when you behave. And so it works. Because of course it does. People do play the Capitol's game with the idea that a slim chance is better than none at all. And the illusion of winning, however small, provides a sort of plausible deniability when the horror of it all becomes too real. In the Capitol interviews, should the conversation turn dark or serious, Caesar can just shake it off with,
or they can edit it out.
Maybe you will win.
I'll tell you what, Peter. You go out there and you win this thing. And when you get home, she'll have to go out with you.
There's also the volunteer system, which is one of the many ways that Snow overhauled the games to add drama. People get picked at random, though I have seen this disputed by some fan theories, but technically, they might not even have to fight, because hypothetically, someone else could volunteer for them. As we're told in the books, this, unsurprisingly, doesn't really happen a lot. So when you're picked, the heavy silence is a reminder.
That doesn't happen a lot, especially in, like, the poorer districts, because no one wants to actually go, because they don't think that they have a chance of winning, like she said earlier in the video. So you see people volunteering a lot in, like, District 1 or 2, or 3, 1 through 4 usually, like, volunteer.
Someone could save you, but why would they do that at the cost of their own life?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that you're probably doomed, and everyone knows it. And you are alone. And so this targets the sense of community within districts, almost to make the point that at the end of the day, they're the only ones who will have their back. What's also key is competition. The competitive nature of the games separates people between one district and another, puts everyone in immediate survival mode, and then creates a hierarchy within oppressed classes. In this respect, the games are similar to gladiator fights, but with some really significant differences. Namely, The fact that tributes are specifically and exclusively children is intentional. Firstly, it's a way to show districts how helpless they are, that not only can you make district people each other's executioners, but of their youngest and most vulnerable. With the legacy of the games, every district will have lost some child at the hands of a different district. So, when tributes do end up killing each other, they have now become a weapon of the capital. They've now carried out violence on the capital's behalf. To the families of the losing districts, the victors are now the face associated with a great personal loss. At the risk of stating the obvious, this creates a general culture of fear. No child will grow up exempt from the knowledge that they might have to participate in this, and no parent is exempt from knowing that they might lose their child to the games, one way or another. Not everyone will be picked, but everyone will grow up bracing for the possibility, preparing mentally on some level for the reality of having to kill another child or of their televised death. And this would be enough, but of course, this isn't even the worst of it, because it's not just the violence. The competitive element existed from the beginning. Still, it wasn't enough to get people to watch when the games started falling in viewership. It's spectacle that elevated it. The goal of the games isn't just to intimidate the districts, but to put on a good show doing so. I've seen some fan theories that the reapings, in fact, aren't random, but are geared towards picking who would produce the most compelling drama.
That would make
And it's
sense.
this spectacle of the games that is its greatest asset. The spectacle dehumanizes everyone involved and hampers everyone's ability to relate to each other. That is, the kids, appropriately named tributes, aren't just sacrificed, they're almost literally turned into products, repackaged, polished, and marketed for quick consumption. Upon arriving in the capital, tributes are groomed to an approximation of capital citizens' unnatural perfection, given makeovers, stripped of body hair, and in the books, boys are prevented from growing facial hair. They're made to be as objectifiable as possible, dressed up in an imitation of their oppressors in what are probably the last days of their lives. But the spectacle isn't just dehumanizing, it does so in a very careful way. Because it doesn't make these people enemies, or monsters, or martyrs. It makes them celebrities. And somehow that's worse.
Will watch the games if they care what happens to the tributes.
Everyone.
Tributes' transformation into celebrities, either temporarily or permanently as victors, is just more humiliation. And in cases like Phoenix, whose body is sold as a commodity, overt exploitation. As if to say, look what we can make you do. Look what we can make you become. And to top it off, we can make you pretend to enjoy it. This is the ultimate show of power. For the tributes to have to entertain the bad jokes, the flippant attitude, and play along days before their suffering will be nationally broadcast. But of course, they do play along because they have to. They have to leverage their likability, a ludicrous thing in the circumstances because it gives them the best chance of survival. And so the spectacle, the pageantry, is the game's biggest asset. In the middle of an unthinkable situation, these children don't even get the dignity of facing it as themselves. They're forced to put on a persona, to hold back what they actually feel, to not share their fear or recognize their competitors as human. Because you can't be likable if you're scared or if you're angry. If you honor your own humanity, you doom yourself.
The lone victor, bathed in riches, would serve as a reminder of our generosity and our forgiveness.
And all of this dehumanization is compounded by the insidious concept of victors. Victors are the ones who may have survived, but they certainly don't win. Any relief of having won is immediately sobered by the fact that it came at the expense of deaths of their peers,
killing people,
including someone from their home district that they may have known.
Yeah.
And the person themselves is forever changed. Victors come out of the games with PTSD and whatever other physical injuries and disabilities. And now they've been made almost certainly killers, complicit now in the acts of the capital. But there's even more to it. Because they're not just severed from themselves, they're severed from everyone else.
They think she's one of them. We need to show that she's one of us.
Prior to the 10th games, the winner went back to their district as though nothing had changed. But one of Snow's clever updates was the reward, and even worship, of victors in order to, as he put it, tempt a better class of tributes to victors in order to,
I hate when that guy touches it, because it's so weird.
Tempt a better
It's
class
just so
of tributes
weird.
to possibly volunteer. The victor worship works on a couple levels.
Wait! Because that's so interesting, because when Katniss won and she was doing the victory tour, that girl was like, I'm gonna volunteer just like you. That's crazy.
First, it leads to, as anticipated, some people seeing the games as a risky
because this
but
person
doable escape from poverty.
Yeah.
Snow asks Seneca, why have a victor at all? And he explains his reasoning, that having a victor to celebrate creates hope. And this hope is what takes the games from a glorified execution to a path to a more comfortable life. It's unjust, but there's a slim chance that injustice might work out in one person's favor. Or at least, this is the idea being sold. Just enough illusion of victory for people to believe it's worth fighting for, but still one unlikely enough to keep people afraid. And furthermore, now when these surviving victims come home as winners, they're severed from their community. Not just emotionally, but also physically. Victors are essentially made into a whole new class of people. Sectioned off in a victor's village, they're given access to wealth their peers will never have.
Yeah.
And it's almost
which begs my question. If I was in District 12 and I was, really, really impoverished and in poverty, why don't just go to the victor's village and squat in one of the houses? Before Katniss and Peeta won, because it was just Haymitch there, and there was 3 houses. I would just squat there. Maybe you'd get kicked out from peacekeepers, but still, there's heating and probably food in there.
In their faces, as if to say, this is what happens when you play our game and win. And so this is an incredibly easy way to build resentment between victors and their former peers and communities, who may now see them as belonging to and representing their oppressor class. And though they're sold this idea that after winning they'll be left alone, victors are never allowed out of the shadow of the games.
They keep coming back.
In another twist of the knife, those who survive the games are made mentors to new tributes. Victors, already with their physical and psychological burdens, are forced to guide new tributes, knowing full well they probably won't survive, forcing them to feel at least somewhat responsible for their deaths. To meet these very young kids, know them up close, maybe grow to care for them, give them the illusion that they can actually help, and watch them die, re-traumatizing them over and over again.
Easy career. You know what that is?
Careers are another byproduct of both Snow's volunteer system and the glorification of victory. They're also another weaponization of class, sort of the counterbalance to how the system preys on the poor. This targets the more privileged in the districts, who embrace the games not as a cruel punishment, but as an opportunity for glory. So competing with the scared, starved, poor children are those in the wealthier districts. 1, 2, and 4, who are raised with the idea that winning the games is a badge of pride. These kids are trained in elite academies and then volunteer at the peak of their fitness. Given both their advantage and their enthusiasm, careers often become capital darlings and give credibility to the culture of the games.
I'm prepared, dishes, ready to go.
You are our family.
But, of course, careers are just another tragedy. The whole concept of careers is just pitting districts against each other and creating elites out of what are ultimately still victimized children. Career children are propagandized into believing that their volunteering is an honor, and the other districts understandably resent their wealthier counterparts for being capital favorites and the most likely to win. And it's true, careers do have a comparatively higher chance of survival, but in being raised to be perfect killers, in being made an enthusiastic part of this whole gruesome spectacle, they're still dehumanized. The life of these kids, in their own eyes and in those of their families, is valued less. We get a harrowing reminder of this during Cato's death, as he realizes...
Anyway, I always was, right?
Because no matter how better off they are, they're still district. and the capital won't let them forget that. So that's the districts. For the other half of society, the games are serving a very different, but equally insidious function. The games disincentivize capital citizens from having any real empathy at all for the districts, curbing any risk of national unity, while at the same time encouraging the capital to have a very particular imitation of empathy. So, though it's not nearly on the same level as district children, the institution of the games dehumanizes capital citizens too. As A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes makes clear, the games without viewership, enthusiastic viewership, mean very, very little. So it's advantageous not just to get citizens engaged, but to keep them engaged, long-term, generationally. Capital citizens are encouraged to become, in many ways, addicted to hyper-violent entertainment.
Just like TikTok.
Which tracks completely for the kind of world they live in their hedonistic, overindulgent culture where all their needs are met to the point of overflow.
Oh, yeah, like the Pascha thing.
It makes you sick. So you can go on eating.
It's crazy.
Of course, entertainment would have to be equally extreme to get through to them. And so, as capital people become emotionally complicit in the games and desensitized to their violence, it suppresses their ability to empathize with others outside their class. And so, it disconnects them not just from others, but from their own humanity. And they become just another half of a psychologically exploitative machine. And this is encouraged in a really clever, manipulative way. The games require two seemingly opposing things. They want to dehumanize district tributes and numb their citizens to violence, and at the same time, the games also rely heavily on their viewers' emotional investment.
If we need people to watch, we should be letting them get closer to the tributes before the games, to make the stakes personal.
Who will watch the games if they care what happens to the tributes?
But investment only in a particular way that threads the needle between emotional investment and care.
Everyone. If they thought the tribute they cared about had a chance of winning.
Because capital citizens need to be invested enough to watch, to place bets, to react to the emotional beats of this television show, but they can't care enough about the well-being of these kids to see the games themselves as an injustice. So the games thrive by nurturing a thin imitation of empathy. And they do so cleverly by masking the violence with this artifice of care. That's what's most insidious. They take the descendants of those ungrateful rebels and pamper them, idolize them, dress them up in their best clothes, feed them their best food. This twisted generosity is a way for the capital citizens to tell themselves, and often truly believe, that they're doing the tributes a favor.
A favor!
Effie
Yes!
is a perfect example of this.
That's what I've been thinking.
She represents the complicity of those in the capital who earnestly think their involvement is a kindness.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the wonderful things about this opportunity, that even though you're here and even though it's just for a little while, you get to enjoy all of this.
She's sincere. And that's the worst part. I find Caesar Flickerman's role in this especially intriguing. He is sickeningly bubbly, charming in an uncanny valley kind of way.
That's so exciting!
He is the ambassador connecting these two worlds, and his charisma is a huge part of why this works. It legitimizes the violence. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Caesar does do a lot of work to humanize the tributes. He asks them personal questions, he laughs at their comments, he, in a lot of ways, makes them look more charismatic than they actually are, and he even allows them to indulge some sadness that can be milked for the audience. But if any of them break the spell, if any of them actually express any resistance to the games themselves...
The Quarter Crow were written into law by men. Certainly it can be unwritten.
But now, you want to kill me again. Well, you know what?
His wall immediately goes up.
Interesting concept. All right then. One woman's opinion.
It is so sinister. He jokes with tributes on TV as if this is all normal, as if they're friends. And then, in the arena, he discusses the horrible things happening as if he's talking about the next day's weather. There is a particular kind of evil about being forced to act friendly and joke around with the people who are about to kill you. This is all based in massive cognitive dissonance, a dissonance that works by emphasizing the barrier between district and capital, making two parts of the same society as distinct as possible. Where in Snow's early life we see fashion that, while still conveying class, was much simpler, as the capital becomes increasingly wealthy following the war, the capital's excess becomes more ostentatious. So, as the class and power gap widens, so do its visual markers. Capital citizens develop their distinct and often extreme signifiers of wealth and status, and become increasingly visually distinct from the districts. And we see this play out as the tributes are introduced. While doing interviews and playing up the reality TV angle of the games, tributes are dressed up in elegant clothes, shiny, and lined up for viewers to project upon and pick favorites. They look relatively familiar. But once in the arena, those visual signifiers are gone, and the tributes become other again.
You really want to know how to stay alive? You get people to like you.
The false empathy goes even further with the idea of sponsorships, another one of Snow's popular upgrades. As an incentive to get them invested, wealthy viewers are encouraged to sponsor tributes. They can send them water, or medicine, or weapons. But, of course, only to those who are following the rules, who, in this nightmare scenario, have earned assistance by making themselves likable enough. By sponsoring tributes, capital citizens get to have their cake and eat it too. They get to...
I never understood that saying. Have your cake and eat it too. Have your cake and eat it too. Yeah, you eat the piece of cake. Have your cake and eat it too. Maybe when my frontal lobe develops, I'll understand what that means.
Indulge in the sensationalized violence of the games, and also pat themselves on the back for having tried to help. The relief of tributes isn't even about them anymore. It's about how it makes capital citizens feel, telling themselves they're good people, this feel-good hit of emotion for them to consume and forget about by the end of the victory tour. Doubling down on designing the games to become addictive, Snow also built a way for people to straight up gamble on them. Just another hook to dig into their audience. In another insult to injury, tributes' performances are publicly ranked in order for those in the capital to place bets on them. It's this flippant gesture to their families back home that both intimidates and humiliates these kids in the days leading up to the games. There is no part of these people that can't be consumed.
I don't know who we will miss more, you or your brain.
Their faces, their bodies, their lives, their deaths, and their emotions.
Now I can sell the star-crossed lovers from District 12.
We are not star-crossed lovers.
It's a television show.
And we see all of this in the way that the games are upended in the first book. Peeta and Katniss manage to save each other by playing the game perfectly, giving the audience a love story to root for. Love...
What's the next video?
Ideally is something honest, something that connects us. But, like everything else spit out by the machine of the games, this is love for public consumption.
It was the bond of love, forged in the crucible of the games, that was our greatest prize.
The capital craves high drama, and Peeta and Katniss are able to exploit this. Their love, however authentically romantic it might be, becomes something that can be dramatized for their own survival. Because it can't be enough that they just wanted to save each other. Because, no, that would be an act of rebellion. The marketable story had to be that Katniss was too deluded by love, that she just couldn't bear to live without him. If it were simply that she cared about someone and didn't want to lose him, who in the games wouldn't qualify? It couldn't just be ordinary human compassion. It had to be something else, a display of emotion so extreme to justify defying the games, while, at the same time, satiating capital citizens' need for intense entertainment. Because, as Haymitch reminds us, it's still a television show. But the exaggerated story that saved Katniss and Peeta's lives was still driven by something authentic. By that human compassion that Panem finds so dangerous. And that's what predicts its downfall. The institution of the games reiterates the classic idea of divide and rule.
They're holding hands.
I want
them dead.
The idea that if the people that you subjugate see each other as the enemy, they're less focused on
who the real enemy is.
They make certain that there is no risk of unity, of solidarity between any of its people. The hand-holding of the victors in Catching Fire may have been a desperate play to save themselves, but nonetheless, we understand why this display of unity is a threat. Because that would undo the basic premise of the games and of Panem itself. For tributes to stand together means recognizing each other not as enemies, but mutually as victims. And we can't have that. And so, to circumvent anything like this, the Hunger Games target collective empathy on a cultural scale, especially and deliberately from society's youngest. So how does this fall apart? Well, the first cracks in the wall are just people treating each other, despite the circumstances, with real care and dignity. It starts with Prim. Katniss volunteers to protect her sister, a story that works to jerk tears out of viewers. Compassion first for a family member. And that's the first link in a chain of humanizing acts.
With Rue and
because there's also Peeta. Peeta, who risked and received a beating from his mother for burning bread to help Katniss live. And although she doesn't share his exact feelings, this means something to her. And then Katniss meets Rue. And Rue reminds her of Prim. And for a moment suspended in time, as if nothing else is happening around them, they care for each other and trust each other. Katniss's love for Prim overrode her own self-preservation, and now Katniss risks her life in an open field for the simple, rebellious act of honoring the life of a girl she cared about. And it ripples outward. In Rue's name, Thresh spares her. Then, Peeta and Katniss's mad love moves viewers enough for Seneca to break the principles of the games. A crucial moment that signaled, for the first time, that something could override Snow's careful rules. Love. Even as a sensationalized half-truth. Then, Peeta gives away part of his winnings to the families of the other tributes. And with the social power that they have as victors, he and Katniss continue to break protocol, at great risk, to honor all the other children who died, allowing them to live. And all of these humanizing acts become a tidal wave, the engine of something unstoppable.
Oh, that seems so sad.
With all the abject horror of the games, I've often found myself wondering, how did this not happen sooner? How did this system not collapse? And, well, to a degree, the system was fragile. Its power was already shaky by the 10th games, and even rebooted, it does fully collapse within 75 years. The games started and ended within Snow's lifetime.
Yeah.
And the way they do certainly wasn't easy, but the driving force is simple. The games and the social system around them is engineered to make solidarity and connection as costly as possible. The reason this works is because empathy is a muscle. A certain amount of power and privilege literally reduces your ability for compassion. According to some psychological studies, including by Professor Paul Piff at UC Irvine, at least in lab settings, wealthy people are less likely than poor ones to relate to the suffering of others. But if empathy is a muscle that can be weakened, it reasons that it can also be strengthened. And that's what we see here. Despite concentrated efforts to suppress it, the compassion of this society is never erased completely. After a life under the Capitol's thumb, and even after experiencing everything she did in the arena, Lucy Gray still says,
I think there's natural goodness born into us all.
I don't think what she's referring to is just a moral good to evil scale. I think the goodness she's talking about is the recognition of ourselves in the other. You could be me. I could be you. The thing that motivates, as Chidi puts it, our innate desire to treat each other with dignity.
The Chevy Equinox is more than an SUV.
Right.
It's your tour guide. And your box.
What are the Hunger Games for?
While the games were a show of power and control over the districts, they also were making manipulative claims about human nature. We see this most explicitly in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes through Gull,
Nature
Snow,
versus
and Lucy
nurture.
Gray. Gull says,
What happened in there, that's humanity undressed. See how quickly civilization disappears? All your fine manners, education, background stripped away in the blink of an eye. Leaving a boy with a club who beats another boy to death to stay alive.
that's mankind in its natural state. Are we really all as bad as that? I would say yes, absolutely. But it's a matter of personal opinion. What do you think? I think I wouldn't have beaten anyone to death if you hadn't stuck me in that arena, he retorted. You can blame it on the circumstances, the environment, but you made the choices you made, no one else. Gall claims that the games merely reveal the truth about human nature, the truth that no one, including children, is really innocent. And while this is partially true, this is a mostly dishonest take, especially coming from someone who, builds death battle royale arenas for children.
Battle royale.
Gall just created her own trolley problem. Because, of course, if you put desperate people in an arena with weapons and the promise of safety if they win, of course many will fight back. So this is less a revealing truth about humanity as a whole, and more about the character of its architect. Yes, people in survival mode can and will do terrible things. So, sure, Gall's statement is technically partially right. But she's omitting some pretty important information. People in the arena aren't in natural circumstances. It's about as engineered as it gets. And actually, it seems as though even in dire circumstances, people are still remarkably reluctant to hurt each other. U.S. Army Brigadier General and Army historian S.L.A. Marshall conducted interviews with thousands of soldiers immediately after they had been in close combat in World War II. And what he found was that only about 15 to 20% actually fired at the enemy. This only started changing in later wars with the implementation of battlefield conditioning, from using language to desensitize soldiers from killing to training them to shoot as a reflex. Not so different from what we see with the games. As sociologist Randall Collins put it, humans are hardwired for interactional entrainment and solidarity. And this is what makes violence so difficult. And I have to think of another line that Collins wrote for Lucy Gray.
People aren't so bad. Not really. It's what the world does to them. Like all of us in the arena.
We did things in there we'd never have considered if they just left us alone. Both Gray and Gall's claims have some truth. We do make choices, but those choices don't exist in a vacuum. But you can't take an extremely curated event and use it to make broad claims about human nature. So, if anything, the intricacy of Panem's and the game's system speaks to how artificial it is. It requires so much calculation, so much force to stay in place. So, despite this machine built so efficiently to train the empathy out of people, it can't get rid of it. And there's something else that I think is also good to acknowledge. While the kindness that undoes these oppressive systems is natural and innate, I think it's also really important to note that kindness requires intention too. Just because it's a part of us doesn't mean that it's always the easiest or instinctive choice. If, again, empathy is a muscle, then every day we have moments that we can choose to exercise it. If human beings can be both antagonistic and cooperative in different situations, then it matters what the social forces around us nurture and value. Of course, there are individual differences and predispositions. Some people might just be innately more compassionate,
Nature
and some
versus
people
nurture.
might just be innately cruel, and there's nothing you can do about it. But by and large, most people are somewhere in the middle. And so I find Lucy Gray's words particularly meaningful because she herself is no stranger to cruelty. She's seen it as a minority within the worst treated district, and now she's been a part of it in the games. She's been a victim of the worst of what people can do to each other. And yet, at the end of all of this, it's still her who delivers the hopeful line. What prompted me to write this piece was wanting to highlight how calculated the game's cruelty was. But as I worked through this, what continues to strike me the most is how innately hopeful this story is. And it works because it's not naively hopeful. It doesn't make the case that people are innately good 100% of the time, that the true goodness Lucy Gray mentions always wins out. The Hunger Games works as a story because it's so unflinching in how it portrays both elaborate and ordinary cruelty, and it still manages to say, this is not the essence of what people are. I admire the series for that. It's a delicate thing to thread, right? Too brutal and it's just cynical grimdark. Too optimistic and it can feel idealistic or naive. But in the same way that the Hunger Games doesn't shy away from the terrible things people can do to each other, it's very clear about the opposite, too. Something good and kind persists in the people in the story, even when it doesn't always prevail or save the day. Regardless, the kind act and its potential to inspire change are always there. And if people in these extraordinary circumstances can choose it, then those of us with our much more ordinary lives certainly can too.
Oh, that was a good video.